big ball. Going for the big shot, and he hits it.
That's batted into the air, intercepted, and the Bears are going to win it.
It's free agency frenzy. The NFL is in full swing. New league year starts tomorrow at 3 p.m. Central. We're recording this on a Tuesday. We have a lot to break down. Nick learned something new about me today. I can spell Equinemius, and just for a warning for all you, the next 3 years at least, while Dayo Odembingo's under contract, we are going to have debates on how to say his name. Welcome into the Halas Beat, brought to you by the Bear Report. I'm Usayd Koshul. He's Nick Whalen. Check us out on Twitter at Usayd Koshul, @ Nick Whalen, and at Halas Beat. Dude, I don't know about you, but Monday morning was this clown show in the world of technology with Twitter going down, not being able to figure out, constantly refreshing, getting the notifications on my phone, but then not being able to provide input. But we got a lot to unpack today, I feel like.
Yeah, it was interesting because I was going between that, and then I was like, is it my internet connection? Then once I realized it wasn't, then I went to Blue Sky because I had an account there. I'm not on there often. And I was getting information over there, and then I'm like, oh no, I don't follow like Schefter or Rappaport. So I was like doing that. It was like 11:05. So it was interesting. But what was refreshing, man, is well, let's do like the cumulative. Okay, the refreshing thing is right now I look at Mike Clay. If people don't know Mike Clay, he does fantasy stuff for ESPN. A good dude, by the way. If you guys don't follow him, please follow him, Mike Clay NFL. He does an interesting process of ranking every individual unit in the NFL. So like everyone's quarterbacks 1 to 32, roughly. You know what I mean? And kind of gives like points on a scale of like 1 to 10, and then you can like rank every team. Chicago now, y'all, he has at a 9 for O-line, and 9 is the highest grade he's given. So like tied for like the best tier of O-line. And overall team are now 12th. And that's tied with Green Bay and San Francisco. And so you want to talk about like cumulative, all of the moves, which we'll get into them, I promise. Being the 12th best team in the NFL right now, I feel pretty good. How about you, man?
Isn't 12th best team like another way of saying we expect you to make the wild card next year? Or at least a wild card team, right? There's 14 seeds, 100%. 7 in the AFC, 7 in the NFC. Yep. 12's got to be pretty good, But okay, so this thing to me gets really interesting because you're losing your mind at 11:05 in the morning. I think it was like 11:11, and I'm like, where is the news on the Drew Dalman signing? This hasn't happened yet, so clearly the Bears are about to be outbid. But I had always kind of known in the back of my head, like, it's going to get done. The Khalil Mack news, obviously a bummer. The Bears go. They bring in Odembingo, Odigbo, whatever it is. I'm sorry, okay? He's going to be Dayo from now on, and Nick's going to laugh at me for this. And then, the news coming in that Grady Jarrett getting cut, and then the Bears basically saying, all right, like, let's go ahead. Let's bring him in on a, was it like 3-year, $43.5 million deal? Like, first off, you knew that Dalman and Dayo were going to be free agents, so you done your homework on them dating back to last season. But to me, the big takeaway was just the sense of urgency that the Bears move with to get those two deals done. But then even more urgent, the Grady Jarrett deal, because it's like he got cut at 9-10 in the morning Central Time. And then for the Bears to basically have him under contract around like 2:30 p.m. Central Time just speaks to the fact that someone in the pro scouting department knew that he was getting cut or anticipated that he was getting cut, and someone had already done background research on him to be able to get his agents on the phone and say, hey, let's close the deal.
Yeah. And the amount of work that we do, y'all, thinking about the Bears, anticipating moves, they do tenfold, 50-fold, right? So they've already anticipated some moves of guys getting cut, and then moving that quickly, I think, just speaks to that, the preparation. But also, I'm gonna quote. I have another screen over here. Also, I'm looking over. I'm reading from the screen, but there's a quote from Ryan Poles in March, one of his press conferences, and he said, "The clearer the vision, the more aggressive you can be." And all of the moves in the past 2 weeks, to me, just looked like this, like, complete like linking together plan of what Ben Johnson wants, what Ryan Poles wants, what Dennis Allen wants. And we saw all of that in the type of personnel and the moves that they made of, hey, you know what? We need this guy. We're going to go get him. We're not going to wait around. There also was some talk of Drew Dahlman turning down more money elsewhere, whether that's true or not. But it looked like, we're not going to go over this number because it didn't seem like they necessarily overpaid for anybody. So they were calculated moves, but they were aggressive moves. And honestly, man, I'm excited to see that. And not the Bears waiting to win in 2026, 2027. They're trying to win right now.
And you talk about just the concept of winning right now. I mean, let's be honest. You look at a lot of the free agent deals, irrespective of the Bears. Like, a lot of these are such quote-unquote long-term moves, but in real time, they're very quote-unquote short-term moves, right? Like Drew Dahlman, 3-year deal. Deo, 3-year deal. That tells me that by the time these guys are ready to hit free agency, Grady Jarrett, 3-year deal. That tells me by the time these guys are ready to hit free agency, what's going to happen is the Bears are going to have a verdict on whether or not Caleb Williams is the guy. Because you really look at it like 2024 is come and gone. 2025's here. Then 2026 is going to come and go. By the time these guys' contracts expire, guess who's going to have finished up their third full season? Caleb Williams, which means the Bears are going to have to make a decision on his 5th-year option. So it seems far away, but it's going to be here much closer than anyone anticipates. Like that 2027 offseason is going to be a big one for the Bears because you're either extending Caleb Williams or you're moving on. And again, for anyone that's sitting here and saying, oh, well, blah, 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 the Bears they already have a franchise quarterback. It's one of those where it's like, this team is offseason champs for a reason. Because it's like they win the offseason on paper, but then they can't do it in real life in terms of actually producing on the field. But it's like you go ahead and look at the signing. I mean, did you and I go back and forth on the Drew Dahlman signing? Yeah. But this also tells me Ben Johnson's not going to run the Ben Johnson Detroit Lions offense. He's going to run the Ben Johnson Chicago Bears offense. And if it means playing with an undersized center that is smaller than what he had in Detroit, he's going to do it, but he's going to make it work somehow. Because to your point about the aggressiveness and the urgency, Ben Johnson doesn't want to wait to find a center that's 6'7", 335. Like, he wants to go ahead and win now. And if it means throwing out some of the stuff he did in Detroit, he's going to do it by all means.
Well, that's one thing that I've been probably the most wrong about in terms of anticipating what I think Ben Johnson might do, is I thought he was going to get big dudes up front. And we talked about it in one of our last episodes. Joe Thuney, great technician, smart player. Obviously, I mean, all pro, one of the top 5 interior O linemen. But he's not a big dude. You look at, again, we just talked about Drew Dahlman, not a big dude. Jonah Jackson is, I would say, solid size for a guard. I mean, you look at Green Bay, he's not Aaron Banks. Aaron Banks is 6'6", 325, 330. So none of our interior are that way. So I think that kind of, we're starting to peel back the layers of what this could look like. We're going to run outside. We're going to run wide zone. We're going to run pin and pull. We're going to run, outside zone. Some people like to call it stretch, but that's what this team's going to be. And so it's nice to kind of peel back those layers. But then not only that, Usayd, we got Dayo Odeyingbo and Grady Jarrett. And now we're seeing what Dennis Allen wants. And this I thought was probably the most fascinating research that I had was when I saw the Deo move, I was not pumped. I saw it, and I was like, okay, he can play inside outside. He's going to be this DeMarcus Walker type player. But then I saw this and it changed my mind. Okay. Cam Jordan. People know Cam Jordan. I've actually referenced Cam Jordan multiple times in the Khalil Mack kind of sweepstakes and people thinking about him because his play fell off after age 32, I believe. Cam Jordan, 6'4" and an eighth, 287 pounds. I didn't realize he was that thick, actually. 35-inch arm length. Big human. Okay. I didn't realize it, but big human over there in New Orleans. And that was Dennis Allen's guy for, so many years. Dayo Odeyingbo, 6'5" and an eighth, so 1 inch taller, 285, 2 pounds lighter, 35 and a quarter inch arm length. That's the same dude. So when you want to think of when they hired this staff, then it sounds like, hey, that's the type of guy I need. Now, again, whether he gets to the level or not, we don't know. Obviously, Cam Jordan is, I would say, could be a Hall of Famer. But getting that mold, that type, that's what Dennis Allen wants. And to me, that speaks not highly of what Austin Booker could do, but speaks to what Ryan Poles is not going to be stubborn. He's like, hey, these guys want these offensive linemen, these defensive linemen. I'm going to go get them.
So, okay, a couple things here. Number one, I look at let me get the easier argument out of the way, or the easier statement out of the way. But number two, let's start with number two here, right? Just because the Bears signed Dio, it does not diminish Austin Booker's role by any means, because if this team is going to do what some of the best in the league have done with the pass rush, it's that Dio's going to have a role, Montez Sweat's going to have a role, Austin Booker's going to have a role. And by the way, I should mention this. We should actually be rooting for Austin Booker come training camp in the season, because even if he is a good rotational player, he can still take the pressure off of Montez Sweat and Dio Odito enough to the point where it's like, you have 3 really good edge rushers. I mean, that is going to be sort of a Khalil Mack, Leonard Floyd, Travis Gibson type deal right there, where those 3 for a couple of years together were pretty solid. And so it's like, I look at that and, well, I should correct myself. Travis never overlapped with Leonard Floyd, but I mean, y'all get the picture, right? Yeah. The point is this, right? Is it's like, it's going to be 3 really good pass rushers, which again is going to bring into question, well, what do the Bears do at 10 overall, which we'll get into later on in the show and in later episodes. But the other big thing I think has to be said for this whole thing is the fact that it's like the Dio signing, you sort of look at and you're like, okay, well, some of the people didn't want him because the Bears are going to pay him $20+ million a year. He was never really going to make $20+ million from everything that I had heard from people. I look at him and I'm like, well, would it be better to sign a guy like Chase Young? Sure. But also, can we be honest about something? The Colts have been one of the more dysfunctional franchises over the last couple of years in pro sports. And so I look at this whole thing and I'm kind of just like, all right, well, can we just be honest in the fact that Dio's never really had any sort of consistency? And that now he's finally going to join a team that's going to play to his strengths. And so as much as people are going to sit there and be like, oh, it was a bad move, like, give the guy a chance because he has shown a lot on tape. And yeah, he's not going to probably never put up, 14, 15, 16 sacks a year. But it's like, how many guys put that up year in and year out? Right. So he's more of a guy that it's like they brought him in because he has the arm length that Dennis Allen loves. He also has the height that Dennis Allen loves. And then the big frame, if he can just figure out how to maximize that big frame and play a little bit lower at the pad level, I mean, the sky's the limit for Dio.
Yeah, and I want to talk actually him and Grady Jarrett, because there's some context I think that Bears fans maybe don't know. So he was Dengbo was a 2nd-round pick, but he tore his Achilles at the Senior Bowl. So he goes into his rookie year injured. We know that Achilles is a tough injury to come back from. So, you think that might take a year and a half to feel real good about. And then he was in this weird mix, because they had him, they had DeForest Buckner, they had Latu, they had Kwity Paye, they had, I can't think of all, they had a bunch of pass rushers there, and he kind of shuffled around between D tackle and D end. At just D end 2 years ago, he had 8 sacks, which is not bad for a 30-year player, which I just talked about. Didn't play a ton starting out because of the injury, and then he had to play some D tackle last year. So moving around a bunch, I don't know that you got a true feel for what it is. And this is a gamble, right? You're betting on traits, size, as you talked about, and a young guy that's going to be 26, and you're hoping that it could be something longer. Versus Josh Sweat, you're like, I hope I get a couple good years out of him. Grady Jarrett's the same way. I hope I get a couple good years out of him. Grady Jarrett, people are like, he fell off last year. And Grady Jarrett tore his ACL in 2023. So last year, midway through 2023, I think it was week 8, comes back last year, has the 13th most snaps of any D tackle. And I think he had the 30th most pressures. But he's a smaller, shorter guy. And coming off an injury, he's probably going to wear out a little bit because Atlanta didn't have a ton of, good D linemen. So you had to play a ton of snaps. And so coming off of the ACL, playing a ton of snaps, I'm sure your efficiency is going to go down. So I think those are two contexts with injuries that I think probably go into the analytics committee thing that they don't account for with these two players in the signings.
And part of me starts to sort of wonder now, okay, well, you have there in, we know it's a really good D tackle class coming, a very good D line class, but Grady Jarrett, veteran, coming off a year where he wasn't, let's just call it how it is, like 110% healthy, or he wasn't as healthy as we've seen, right? So there's that first one. Second thing I think is this is Andrew Billings coming back from the pectoral injury. Well, do the Bears possibly use the draft now sitting at number 10? Like, I don't think Mason Graham's going to be there, but let's just say Mason Graham is there, or at 39 and 41. I mean, do the Bears suddenly add a D tackle in to give that unit even more insurance, or are we rolling the dice and running back with Zach Pickens for one more year? I mean, that's a very legitimate question. I think this franchise is going to have to answer at some point over the next 8 to 10 weeks. And the reason being is because it's like part of me goes so back and forth on this, because these signings yesterday are inevitably going to alter how the Bears approach the draft. Now, if you want my honest to God opinion, okay, my incredibly strong opinion is that stay at 10 and take Armand Membu unless you get a trade offer you can't refuse. And that's if he's there, which I think he's going to be the first O-lineman selected off the board, because he's got Penei Sewell-like measurables. Okay. Mm-hmm. And then trade out of 39 and trade down a bit more and just go from there and stack up your picks, which the official draft picks order just came out now with the comp picks being released. So the Bears are 10, 39, 41, 72, 148, 202, 233, and 240.
Mm-hmm. So I got to go back real quick. Grady Jarrett. You know, we had time, you know, listen, y'all, my wife's on vacation. I got a little extra time now, and I'm grinding tape. And I was like, Grady Jarrett, man, like pretty good player. I looked at I looked at a lot of stuff. I looked at like career highlights, right? Before I delve into tape, dude, he had 3 sacks on Tom Brady in the Super Bowl. Remember the big comeback? He was there. Mm-hmm. He had sacks against Cam Newton. I mean, he's been in the league, y'all, for 10 years. He's been in the league a long time. I was like, oh man, this guy's old. I was watching him last year, okay, his down year. Dude, I'm more excited about the Grady Jarrett signing than I think any of the signings. Joe Tooney, I'm more excited about as a trade. But I'm saying of the 3 signings, dude, Grady Jarrett's a dude. He's short. He shoots gaps, messes up. You try and run outside zone away from him, good luck. Towards him, he's going to mess it all up for everybody. He's remember Dennis Rodman on defense? He just messes everything up. That's what his job is. Pass rush wise, he is so good with his hands and his leverage that no one latches on him. I saw him tossing Jonah Jackson multiple times. I was like, oh, and Jonah Jackson, we heard, right? Pretty good guard. And so you go through all this stuff. He gets sacks, QB hits. He actually, no one messes around with him. He's got a little bit of an attitude out there too. When he gets up, he puts a little extra all the time. And I'm like, that's a guy I want on my line. And when you think of, okay, he's 32, right? He took a lot of snaps last year. You talked about Andrew Billings with the chest. They can rotate and keep him, Dexter, Billings, all those guys fresh. You talked about Pickens. I mean, getting a 1-tech, I think, would be ideal, right? I mean, a Kenneth Grant, an Alfred Collins, a huge dude as a 1-tech would be awesome at some point. But just keeping those 3 guys more fresh so that way they can play at their max. Because y'all, it's like a hockey line changes. That's what defensive line is. But man, you get Grady Jarrett at 90% Grady Jarrett. You get Billings back and he's 90% of him. And Dexter's rising up. That's a good interior D line, y'all.
And just saying, the 1-tech typically lines up on the outside shoulder of the center. For those of you guys that don't know, a 0-tech, which again, this defense isn't featured because 0-techs are typically in 3-man fronts, head up on the center. Okay, the 1-eye is inside shoulder of the center. But okay, see, to me, this Grady Jarrett signing gets pretty exciting, and we're gonna have a longer show today because we're both bachelors for the week. So there we go. But okay, so to me, the big thing is this with the Grady Jarrett signing is that there's a sense of like versatility that he provides, right? In terms of how he can make other guys on the D line expendable. But like you talked about how he's not the biggest guy out there. Now, the other thing to me is that there's three things that I look at when evaluating a defensive lineman. Okay. The first thing you're looking at is obviously the feet, right? Like as a lineman, the moment you stop moving your feet, you lose the rep. That's the first thing. The second thing is your hands, okay? Which can you strike your hands, violently? Basically like a triangle formation with your thumbs basically going outward and boom, striking the guy's, chest. Third thing I look at is eyes. Now, if you get your eyes, your hands, and your feet to mirror properly with your good pad level and you're playing low, I mean, that there to me is textbook for what really good D-line plays look like. Mm-hmm. And just like, we sit there and talk about Joe Thuney being the technician on offense. I mean, there's a legitimate argument to be made that Grady Jarrett's a true technician on defense in terms of how some of these smaller defensive tackles can go ahead and play. Because it's like, I'm curious to know what else you saw on tape, but like his feet, eyes, and hands move together in sync, which creates a damn good football player.
Mm-hmm. Oh, 100%. And the other thing too is with D-line, and again, when I say, smaller, like he's not, think back Bears fans, like he's not Keith Traylor or Ted Washington out there, okay? Or Javon Dexter, who's humongous human. He's just shorter. But like I saw times when it's like, 4th and 1, 3rd and 1, and he's got to get low. You ain't getting lower than Grady Jarrett. Like he gets low. He's like, all right, I have the leverage, right? He just sinks his hips and it's like, good luck. And is the other thing with an older player like that is he's smart. He knows like the angles to take. Like there was one where I saw where Jalen Hurts goes to scramble and Grady Jarrett's pursuing. He's like, I'm not catching this dude. So he goes upfield and takes a different angle and Jalen Hurts knows I can't run now. So I got to throw it or throw it out of bounds. And so like those types of things, but also he engages and then he sees where he's supposed to go, disengages and then pursues, or he gets engaged, knows he's not going to get there and he's seen what's going on and he disengages and he tackles the tight end. I saw him tackle Tucker Kraft on like a tight end screen. So like you're not fooling him. And so you think of not just, we talked about this with Joe Thuney, not just what they're going to do on the field, but what they're going to do for Javon Dexter's development, what they're going to do for Deo Odengbo's development, what they're going to do for Austin Booker's development. Like all these guys and their development, they're going to help. So you talk about like that domino effect that pulls likes with Montez Sweat. I literally heard that from Falcons beat writers praising Grady Jarrett and what type of impact he has on the entire team, not just himself.
And that's really the big thing here with some of these vets that the Bears have bought in, right? Like let's be honest about this free agent class. Okay? A guy like Dio, yes, you hope that he makes people around him better, but you're kind of expecting him to be the individual on the team that continues to just pad stats and have an impact week in and week out, right? You're kind of looking for that with Drew Dalman as well. But then some of these vets like a Joe Thuney and Grady Jarrett, are you looking to get consistently good performances from them week in and week out? Yeah. But then the other part of this, the reason that these guys are brought in is because you're literally bringing them in so they can make guys around them better. And that really, I think, to me, starts to raise the question of, well, what do the Bears do in the draft now? Because 72 hours ago, before any of these guys' contracts were agreed to, let's call it how it is, like at 10, 39, 41, 72, we could have sat there and made the argument that the Bears can go a combination of center, D-tackle, pass rusher, offensive tackle in any of those four orders, right? Which I interviewed one of Gray Zabel's teammates yesterday. That'll be an interview that's coming out shortly here over the next week or so. But if you're interested, go to our RSS feed. We got an interview with Austin P linebacker Bo Spearman, who just talked to a Bear Scout. He texted me as well that he talked to a Bear Scout today. But anyways, the other big thing is this, right? Is it's like, where do the Bears go with a guy like Drew Dahlman on the roster here, because I'm super excited to see Dahlman. Now, my question with the center position, just in the grand scheme of things, is that I wonder who the Bears are going to bring in for backup center. Is it going to be Ryan Bates? Coleman Shelton's going back to the Rams, returning to his roots. I mean, can we just straight up say that the Bears traded Jonah Jackson or Coleman Shelton for Jonah Jackson? Can we do that? Is that a thing at all?
I mean, it's similar. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that Rams had him, lost him, then brought him back. I mean, so quickly, Drew Dahlman, people kind of pinned me as Drew Dahlman hater for a while. That's not the case. I just didn't want to pay. 14 was actually my edge, my limit. It was 11, 12, I'm happy. But 13, 14, I'm like, I get it. I'm fine. I don't, love it. I get it. Anything above 15, I was out. Because when you looked at the Vikings got Ryan Kelly for $9 million a year for 2 years, that's the difference, y'all. And so, but Drew Dahlman's a good center. He's a good center. He's very athletic. Dad is Chris Dahlman, former 49ers Super Bowl champion. Both went to Stanford, by the way, which I thought was actually kind of cool. Athletic. Think of a worse version of Kelsey at center. That's kind of what he is. Little smaller, super quick, great with getting to the second level, great with outside zone type stuff. Good communicator. Because he isn't a huge dude, he can get pushed back in the pocket. Pass protection, he's average, maybe slightly below average. But again, a good center, not elite. I would say good. And so he's making the second highest, I think, contract for a center right now. But I guess we have the money to spend and whatnot. So I'm not terrible in the move. It made the Bears better. I would have liked a young guy to develop between the two vets, but also when you think about it, man, in terms of the order of things, he's there for, and a lot of these deals, y'all, they were 3-4-year deals. It's really 2 years guaranteed. Third year, we'll see what happens. Same thing with Dahlman, but Dahlman's here for a 3-year contract. Tony has 1 year left. Jonah Jackson has 2 years left. So it actually could be next year. We're here talking on this podcast, and Drew Dahlman's the only one that's still here. That could certainly be the case. So having someone that's here who can make the center calls, right, can make things a little bit easier for Caleb where he doesn't have to do as much work up front. I think it's worth it. I still think it's a good move for 14. If it was 15, 16, I would have been not liked it. It would have been in the Tremaine Edmonds moves for Ryan Poles for me.
So a little bit of a fun fact about the Dahlmans here. Okay, so Dad went to a high school in California, Palma School, I believe it was. Drew Dahlman went there as well. They both went on to Stanford. Former Bears quarterback David Falls, I think I mentioned this in our episode 4 to 5 days ago, went to that same high school as well. David Fales, I'm sorry. Okay, but so you brought up a really good point, right, about putting a cap on how much you're going to pay these guys. And this just hit me, is that there's a sense of there's a ceiling that Ryan Poles operates with when it comes to a lot of these guys. Mm-hmm. Because it's if you look at Khalil Mack, I mean, he got 1 year, $18 million from the Chargers. Well, the Bears, I'm sure, made an offer to Khalil Mack, right? But the reality of it is that they didn't haul him in because they weren't going to go to that 18 million mark, right? Yep. Same with a Grady Jarrett. I mean, if Grady Jarrett had pushed $15 to $16 million, is he even a Bear right now? Same with Drew Dahlman. Same with Joe Thuney if he's not coming in at whatever it is, $15 million a year that he's making right now. Jonah Jackson's making $9 to $10 million a year. So the point I'm making here is that it's for all the talk out there about sign this veteran, sign this guy, blah, blah, blah. Ryan Poles has shown that as soon as it gets close to let's just say 18, I'm going to say 17 to about $20 million. He's not going to go there for some of these guys that are looking for that second contract.
Yeah.
And usually it's because that second contract, you're either boom, pop off, or you stay stagnant, or you just level out and you're out of the league in 2 to 3 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's good to see, because it's good to see that it's not desperate making moves, which is what we talked about, which is what free agency was supposed to take away the desperation. And that's why they traded for some guys too. Another case of this last year, which people are going to be like, well, this is terrible. I mean, now hindsight is Saquon Barkley, right? They were in the sweepstakes for Saquon. It got higher than the number that he wanted to. And so he pivoted and got Swift. But it's the same thing with these. I'm sure that Ryan Kelly signing after Drew Dalman is on purpose because teams were waiting to see what Drew Dalman was going to get, and then they're going to go to Ryan Kelly. Same thing with Will Fries after some of the guards signed, right? So, yeah, it's definitely good and smart to have a budget. That's what this is. We all have budgets at home. How much can we spend on a house, a car, etc.? And it's the same thing by position and kind of what everyone wants to do. And also, the more pennies you pinch, because I know people are like, just pay this guy whatever to get him in the building. Well, the more pennies you pinch, the more flexibility you have moving forward with Kyler Gordon extension. Hey, middle of the year this year, do we want to trade for a guy to help with pass rush, et cetera? So the more money you can save, the more flexibility it has moving forward. Or if Chicago wants to, in the draft, trade up and get Abdul Carter, right? Which would cost some more. So you have to think about those things where, hey, if we spent $2 million more on Drew Dalman, maybe we can't make this other move.
So let's talk about, and I know I kind of tried to get this conversation started, but I totally messed up the outline. I mean, I'm curious to know, right? So there is a sense of excitement that for me kicks in when I start to analyze the different scenarios. The Raven.
Can I jump in? I have one other thing quick on the money. Sorry.
Go ahead. I mean, the Ravens just signed DeAndre Hopkins, but whatever. Go ahead.
Washed. All right. If the Bears want to save some more money, I have two scenarios. I'm curious if you think these could be things. So you mentioned Ryan Bates. Ryan Bates could be cut and they could save $4 million. So I don't know if that's something that they want to do. I know there's the shoulder, but also now that you have those guys established and whether they want to go young with Bill Murray, et cetera, that's a way they could save $4 million. The other one I think is actually more intriguing for me. The DeMarcus Walker release I got. Right, save $5 million, doesn't fit the scheme or whatever. I get it, okay. But then they tendered Chris Williams for $3.2 million, okay. But after the Deo Odengbo signing and the Grady Jarrett signing, I'm not sure that a 3-tech or an undersized D end, or a big D end, that's what Deo can do, makes sense for $3.2 million as a backup. So until Chris Williams signs a tender, they can remove it and he would just become a free agent. I would be very in favor of removing that now that we signed 2 guys on the D line and we're probably going to draft some and save $3.2 million. What do you think?
Yeah, that is something that I'm certainly open to. And the reason being is because it's like, yes, the cap keeps going up every single year. But then the reality of it also is it's just like, hey, would you rather spend, to me, like Chris Williams is the type of player where it's like age and sort of past production comes into play here. And it's like, would you rather spend the $3.2 million on a vet like Chris Williams that you know you're not going to get anything out of? Or would you rather take the $3.2 million, give it to a younger player, right? A guy that you know could be productive, someone that you see being a long-term part of the team. Because to me, the reality of it is that I don't really see any situation where Chris Williams has a significant impact. And I will be honest with you on this, right? Like, if Chris Williams is on this roster come July 1st, when we start writing our training camp previews, yeah, I'm thinking that far ahead here at Bear Report. I do not see a situation where he shouldn't be a guy for every one of us beat writers that is sort of on the bubble.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, because if Pickens is on the bubble, Chris Williams is certainly on the bubble. You know what I mean? So, yeah, that's certainly something to think of. So, all right, man, you've been itching to get into the draft stuff, okay? And I actually, right before I got on here, I have my own takes, but I like to absorb other takes. This was an interesting one. So Matt Miller, NFL draft scout on Twitter, or X, whatever you call it now, said that he does not think that Chicago should draft O-line at 10 because of past conversations with polls with Darnell Wright and Braxton Jones. even if Will Campbell is there, because he's like, Will Campbell is not a Joe Alt. I like Membu. He's my favorite O-lineman. I'm curious what you think on that. If they don't go O-line at 10 at all, because they could go so many other ways.
So really, to me, at that point, I start to have to look at positional value and who is there. Now, Abdul Carter, we know, is not going to be there. If he is there, then I think you know the obvious answer. I mean, Mason Graham, it's a 1A, 1B for me with Mason Graham and Abdul Carter. But I start to look at this thing and I'm like, in the bigger picture here, I mean, can we be honest about something? Braxton Jones is who he is at this point, right? Like, he is who he is at this point. He's not going to get any better. I've watched him up close at training camp in the hot July sun for 4 years now, and every single time I watch the Bears online, I end up falling asleep because it legitimately is that boring sometimes with some of the talent that's gone through this place.
Can I make a case for Braxton?
I mean, yeah, 1 second. I'm not a certified Braxton Jones hater.
Go ahead.
I wouldn't be mad if he was here, but I'm also just like, it's hard to, not just for 2025, but also in the long run, start to think like, okay, maybe, just maybe, having a better upgrade out there, like a Membu who's got a higher ceiling for you, isn't a bad idea, because now you're going to have your 2 bookend tackles that you've taken over a 3-year period, and then you have a really damn good interior as well. And honestly, I think Braxton, if he wants to, if the Bears go with Armand Membu, Braxton Jones can stick around as a swing tackle.
So here's my only thing with going tackle is I'm like on an island. I have way more faith that Karan Amagashi could be this team starting left tackle, because everyone watched what he did last year when he should not have played, and they're like, mine's made up as a rookie, by the way. We already knew he was a developmental rookie even before recovering from the injury. Is Chris Morgan was their O-line coach, man. And like, I don't think Chris Morgan was a great O-line coach. And so you get Dan Richard now, maybe he does squeeze more out of Braxton Jones because he's a good O-line coach. I mean, he developed some good O-lines in New Orleans, and same with Karan Amagashi. And so to me, I mean, Karan could be the swing tackle. I get that part of it. You know what I mean? If you do get either of these guys, which we're on the same page, man. Membu is like tackle 1 for me. O-lineman 1 in this class. Like, love him. I didn't want to waste a 3rd round pick not knowing if he does develop, because he has those long arms, or if Braxton Jones does take a step, and then you sign him and it's $18 to $22 million a year for 3 years or something like that, like the Charles Leno deal they should have made. So that's my only case with that in O-line. So one path at the draft, I think we're going to be draft now. We're going to be talking all about that I'm way more open to now is Tyler Warren. We know Ben Johnson loves multiple tight end sets in Detroit. Tyler Warren, y'all, if you haven't watched him after the reception, I mean, think Brock Bowers light, more power, though, bigger guy. But also, we know Ben Johnson likes trick plays, and Warren can run, and he can throw, and he did that a ton at Penn State. And so I was like, think of like, instead of getting a good wide receiver 3, we just improved tight end 2, and now all of a sudden all the packages Ben Johnson can use with him, and he can block. So he's physical. So we're still going with the trenches and running the ball, but now you can't predict what they're going to do based off of their personnel.
Yeah, that is a really good point there. And again, you know, to your point about, Tyler Warren, I mean, I think going to come out and say it. The biggest thing to sort of keep in mind is let's just look at some basic measurables here, okay? So Sam Laporta to me is the picture perfect tight end for what Ben Johnson wants to do, right? The picture perfect tight end in terms of the blocking and receiving ability. And I'm a big believer in the fact that the Bears can kind of make it work and figure it out with Tyler Warren plus Cole Kmet. Okay. Durham Smith, I think the Bears signed simply because it kind of came down to, hey, we just need a legit tight end 3 because Mercedes Lewis probably may not be back. But then also the big thing is we want someone in here that's going to help some of these younger guys learn the system. Now, getting back to the Sam Laporta thing here, I mean, Sam Laporta is 6'3", 245. Got it? Tyler Warren is 6'5.5", 256. Okay. So you are basically getting 3 more inches of size in terms of the height, and about what, like, if I do the math properly or off the top of my head, okay, like 8 to 10 more pounds almost of weight at that position of just pure strength that you probably didn't have. And I think for a lot of people right now, like, taking a tight end may not be the most popular thing on the planet, but I'm also just like, is there going to be a DN worth taking at 10? Is it going to be one of the Texas A&M guys that the Bears rank over these tight ends, or do the Bears go ahead and say, yeah, well, we can take a defensive end later. Nick Scorton's solid, but we're going to stick with Tyler Warren here. And I firmly believe that is a legitimate consideration.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm glad I'm not crazy. I we're on the same page. So I want to hear you talk DNs, because I in my mind, I can see a defensive end room where they have like a pass rusher guy, like a Austin Booker, to match the Odangbo, sweat big dude type thing. But and getting a James Pierce, a Mike Green, the guy from Boston College, those smaller guys. But I'm curious what you think about the bigger guys.
Okay, so I actually, funny enough, a couple hours ago earlier today, I started to write up my scouting report on Ole Miss edge rusher Jared Ivey. He's about 6'5", 264 or something. And so Ivey's not going to be a first-round pick, by the way, but I believe the conversation's still worth having because he does fit what the Bears are looking for. Like I said 2 minutes ago, and I know I'm sounding super repetitive here, but if Abdul Carter's there, you take Abdul Carter. But I also go ahead and I look at this whole thing and I'm like, what about a guy like a James Pierce Jr.? He kind of fits what the Bears are looking for in some of these edge rushers, in the sense of taller, lengthier guy, does play with a lot of speed to power. But I also look at, what about the possibility of Michael Williams from Georgia? The A&M guys, Nick Scorton and Shamar Stewart, would not be bad options either. And then you obviously have in round 2, I believe, Jack Sawyer from Ohio State would be a very interesting name. He, to me, is like a Sam Hubbard 2.0, which I don't think, if the Bears got a Sam Hubbard type player on their roster, I don't think anyone would be pissed off at that at all. Nope. And so I kind of look at this whole thing and I go out, I'm like, all right, well, you know what? DN should still be in the conversation at 10, even with the Dio signing. But I would not be mad if the Bears addressed DN. But all those names I just rattled off, like a Nick Scorton, I really believe is the one guy, though, that I don't think fans are talking about as much as they should.
I mean, there's so many big DNs. Like all the guys you talked about. I mean, Jordan Birch, 6'6", 285. You talked about Scorton. So some of the size y'all here, I'm just going to go through. So Scorton, 6'4", 280. Jordan Birch is 6'6", 285. Landon Jackson's a guy I like. So you think of more like pocket pusher, hustle guy, doesn't have as much bend. Again, it's tough to bend when you're 6'6". So he's 6'6", 273, Landon Jackson. Jack Sawyer and J2 Tumalu, they're both 6'4", 269, 271. So about the same. Bigger DNs. Michael Williams, 6'5", 265. Shamar Stewart, 6'5", 281. So those are your big DNs. The other guys, so Abdul Carter, Jalen Walker, if you call him an edge, 250, 6'3", 250, 6'2", 245. Mike Green, I know he has the off-the-field stuff, 6'3", 251. James Pierce, 6'4", 245. Donovan.
That's a rook. Yeah, no, we'll figure it out draft weekend.
Yeah, I mean, dude, so bendy. Like, I would argue, besides Carter, might be the best pure pass rusher in this class. Like, love him. 6'2", 248. So a little smaller, but it's a deep DN class. So which brings me to this. Why go DN at 10 when you can go DN at 39 or 41?
which frees you up to take Tyler Warren at 10, right? If I did that properly. But see, to me, I also look at this whole thing and I'm just like, all right, well, if you truly believe that one of the names that you rattled off is going to be a legitimate game changer, you go ahead and you take one of those guys. That to me is something that you can't necessarily go ahead and pass up on. But then also it's like a contradicting of philosophies, right? Because it's like I've kind of been here and some of our listeners are probably pissed off at me at this point for saying like you could do this or you could do this, but if you do this, then you're giving up this. So it's like if you take Tyler Warren, you're adding to Caleb Williams and the offense. But if you take a D end, well, you just passed up on a guy that is bigger, faster, and stronger than whatever Sam Laporta did in Detroit. Again, whole picture of what the ideal Ben Johnson tight end. So I look at this thing and I'm just kind of like, if they do go pass rusher at 10, I wouldn't be mad about it. But then also the opportunity to take 2 defensive linemen is certainly there. Now, to me, the cherry on top here would be if they can go ahead and, like I said, take an Armand Membu or Tyler Warren. Again, it wouldn't ever be – some people would be pissed off at it because they'd be like, oh, my God, a tight end. But I would be in favor of it because, again, like – to me right now, let me just get this out the way with the Armand Membu stuff. I fully believe that Armand Membu for the next 4 years, because he's under contract for the next 4 years, right? For the next 4 years, he's going to have a significantly higher ceiling than anything that Braxton Jones had. Yeah. And I know some people are going to call me a Braxton Jones hater for it, but again, I've seen 3 years of him. Like, he is what he is at this point. But if you can upgrade the O-line to the point where you got your 2 bookend tackles for the foreseeable future, and then you go ahead and you have a solid interior, that still gives you the flexibility to take 2 D linemen and 39 and 41 in round 2. And then by there, 72 is a total wild card. This edge class is deep enough to the point where you could take it solid edge rusher at 72 if you really wanted to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I'm with you, man. And the best part about this, man, and we'll have this talk, on the next 20 episodes before the draft, is the Bears have flexibility now. Like, think of it if they didn't sign any of the 3 guys. Then it's like, I don't know, maybe we have to trade down and get Gray Zabel. Oh, we have to take Jared Wilson at 39 or 41. Oh, no, we have to take a D tackle because we don't have Grady Jarrett. We have to take an edge because we don't have Deo Odegbo. Like, we go through the list. It's like they did this so they can go BPA. They could go Genty. They could go Membu. They could go Warren. They could go D-end. They could trade down. They could take Josh Simmons. Any of those moves, I get. They could trade up. Any of those moves, I get because now they have roster flexibility, which is exactly what you want. It means that they can make the best calculated move that they want. Just like at 9, that they wanted to trade up and get Rome last year, but they sat there like he was the best guy on our board. And I know teams say that, but I think like you can actually do that at 10 this year.
Just saying, if the Bears had taken Olu last year instead of Rome Odunze, the conversation about me wanting Armand Membu this year does not happen at all. But we'll have to talk about the running back situation later because now it's kind of just like, hey, you've gone ahead and you've added 3 really good offensive linemen over the last week and a half. There's a chance that a 4th one is on the way, which I still believe the Bears are going to address the trenches for depth with whatever it is, like the 4 day 3 picks that they have this year. And so all of that kind of leads to, what about the running back position? Like that to me, as we start to wrap up here, becomes this sort of true wild card for what the Bears should do, because it's like if you had to if you put a random poll out there on Twitter and you were like, okay, so you get a running back at 10, you get an unnamed running back at 10, or you get an unnamed tight end at 10, who do you think ends up winning that debate amongst Bears fans based on the poll alone?
Oh, running back.
Yeah, that I feel like it's true knowing the context of this class. It's just like...
Right, because they have one guy in their head.
Yeah, that is so true. Even though, I mean, running backs can be very scheme transcendent, and with the Bears running this sort of wide zone / sometimes they'll have gap scheme in there. I mean, you can open things up tremendously. But before we get out of here, dude, you got any closing thoughts on the running back versus tight end debate? Go ahead. We got all the time in the world.
Yeah, I've got one other thing. This will only take probably a minute. Another scenario I didn't think of. My dad brought up today is. Shout out to my dad who listens to the podcast, to my fam. Is if they traded down, what if they went safety? He mentioned the kid from South Carolina. I mentioned Malachi Starks. And that goes into the whole thing of, well, we don't know what Ben Johnson, Dennis Allen, even Ryan Poles think of, Brisker's health, I would assume at this point. But Malachi Starks is a dude as well, y'all. And so, all those concussions being out that many games, I think that's you could talk about like the biggest holes on this team right now. Just for 2025, it might be safety and it might be running back. Those might be the biggest holes in the team right now.
Which, side note, let me just say is a really good problem to have. But you brought up the safety conversation. So now we have to kind of get into it here for the next couple minutes. Sure. But I'm going to go because I'm going to forget all this stuff before Thursday. That's the issue. Okay. But the big thing here is this with the safety position. So the safety position to me with Dennis Allen's incredibly unique because you know that he likes to play that sort of too high shell, that too high structure. Now, the other big thing to keep in mind is this, is it's like Dennis Allen has never really had a true box safety like a Jaquan Brisker on his team.
Yeah, that's true.
All of a sudden now, a guy like a Malachi Starks or Xavier Watts, everything sort of becomes this sort of like, hey, is it really a scheme fit? Which I'm sure, your family knows that to me, I mean, scheme fit trumps individual talent all above all else. Like that's at least my incredibly strong opinion. But it's just like now you do start to wonder, okay, you've got Kevin Byard. What about Jaquan Brisker? If he's not back, then are the Bears really going to go ahead and bring in a
Marcus Williams?
Yeah, Marcus Williams probably. But it's just like getting back to, let me just take a step back here. The reason that the Bears even brought in Brisker is because Flus wanted to run that Tampa 2. And again, in the Tampa 2 at the most foundational level, when you have a big linebacker like Tremaine Edmonds roaming the middle of the field, that allows you to constantly bring your safety up into the box. So Edmonds is dropping back, kind of almost playing safety. Jaquan Brisker was coming up on all these situations. And so now you start to kind of get away from the true Tampa 2. And you're like, all right, well, Edmonds maybe isn't going to be dropping back 30 yards away from the line of scrimmage. So that means that the Bears are going to look more like an actual secondary with a lot of the too high looks that Dennis Allen's going to be having. Mm-hmm. And so now Marcus Williams all of a sudden becomes this idea. Or it's, hey, Jaquan, you're just going to have to drop back and play too high with Kevin Byard the entire time.
Yep. And plus Kevin Byard's a little older too. So like you want to talk about like planning for the future. I know everyone's thinking about that like at left tackle. I mean, those guys are young. Like Kevin Byard's older. He had a good year. Brisker's health. I mean, you think of what's the backup plan? Jonathan Owens is old. He's like 30, 31. Like he's not the future there. So getting a future guy there, I mean, could make some sense. So again, I know it's a longer episode, y'all, but just thinking through some scenarios, and plus we still have free agency. They still could sign some more guys and change everything we thought of.
Real bold prediction here before you log off. If the Bears do bring any safety depth, I think it's going to be Will Harris, unrestricted free agent, spent last season with the Saints and is currently he's about 30 years old, so, not a horrible signing anyway. But anyways, we're not really sorry for the super longer episode. I promise we'll return to our 30 to 35 minute ones later this week. But that's going to do it from us. Make sure you're following us on Twitter at Usayd _Nick Whalen. Check us out on Twitter at HowIsBeat as well. Make sure you like, subscribe, rate the podcast. Subscribe to the YouTube channel as well. That growth helps us kind of continue to bring you guys all this type of really good stuff. We will be back Thursday night into Friday morning with another really good episode. So be sure to tune in. And until then, ladies and gentlemen, bear down and enjoy the free agent signings.